Hello everyone, Prince Dabslot here, and today I'm going to be talking about the finale of God's Teeth, Part 4, The Hidden God. If you haven't seen them, go back and watch my videos on the other parts as I go through step by step how to run these sections of the God's Teeth campaign, as this is the big finale, the big ending moment, and it was fantastic. So much fun, so bleak, so horrific, everything a good finale of a Delta Green campaign should be. Before we go in, I have some announcements. I will be at PAX Unplugged this weekend, so if you see me there, come say hi. I always like seeing my fans and other fellow Delta Green fanatics at places like this. So again, if you see me, don't be afraid to walk up and go say hi to me. Also, I have been playing and I have a guest appearance coming up on RPG Reanimators and their podcast. So please check that out wherever you listen to podcasts. There's some great stuff here, and we talked about hypergeometry in Delta Green for quite a long time. So keep an eye out for when that drops. And hey everyone, a like a day keeps the Illigor away. If my videos have helped you out run this campaign, hit me with a like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Thanks everyone. I also think it's worth dropping another content warning for this. If you've seen or read part one, you know the kind of things that are inside of it involving some abuse to children. And this part four just doubles down, or perhaps repeats, more accurately to say, a lot that's occurring here. So if you are sensitive to that, it's genuinely pretty horrific stuff. It's necessary for the plot, but just another content warning out here that if that stuff makes you uncomfortable, can't blame me at all. But this might not be the campaign or the video for you. So we're going to start part 4 by talking about the section in between part 3 and part 4 called the spiral, and this is where you're going to slot in any additional scenarios you want to run, and this is also where you're going to slot in the fantastic God's Hunt scenarios if that's something you want to run, which I do encourage you to do, as it adds a lot to the general ecosystem of Bast and your agent's places inside of there, along with being just generally fantastic scenarios. I ran 3 of the 4. The one I didn't run is God's Law, which I do plan on rerunning at a later date. We just had real life time constraints coming up, and we had to be done with the campaign by this last weekend. But we did it, and this is where we're going to slot all those in. You will begin play of part 4 with some creepy scenes, much like the long years previously, as this kind of extended time jump happens, showing bits and bobs of your agents' lives as they get noticed by Bast again and called back into her service. Now, one narrative issue I ran into, and this is something I've been kind of sweating from the beginning of the campaign, and I made some tweaks around it to try and help when I introduced my new agents, but I had all of my original agents die or disappear or go missing, basically. So I had no OG agents running into this part 4, which was a concern of mine, as this campaign definitely has some weight for the original agents that was missing by this. So I decided I need more additional character wedges between my players so that there could be inner character conflict that is occurring or something for them to latch onto. So when I had a new agent join in God's Light, he was actually an outlaw insider agent sent by Acel or Alphonse to infiltrate this working group Masticate and see what's going on and see if they can pull these killers, these great unnatural bloodhounds, to the outlaws' side. And I also had one of my new agents, when they rolled up new agents after he was lost in God's Light, he was also an Outlaw Insider agent. So that leads 2 Outlaw Insider agents inside my cell, 2 non-Outlaw agents inside my cell. And that was just a way, again, to increase the character versus character tensions in the finale, which definitely worked out in my favor in terms of excitement, as they all ended up gunning each other down. But I'll go more in detail into the fate of my agents when we talk about the finale in full. But this is just going to be a narrative issue you are going to run into, where if you don't have any OG agents, you are losing a little bit of that impact and some special roles and some special insights that they may have. So it's just something you have to work around, and you have to decide if you're going to force an agent from the part 1 to survive to this point, or if you're going to play it truly objective and just let the dice roll how they may, which is what I did. You're going to end up with something like this, but you could always work in that outlaw angle that I mentioned previously to this to give your agent something else to latch onto, some other conflict of interest that they can interact with in terms of the characters. And both of my agents that played Insider Outlaw agents were very happy with what I gave them and how they operated and how that all shook out. So something I would recommend if you're looking to increase that player versus player tension in this finale is definitely play up that outlaw stuff. And besides, I love the outlaw versus the program schism and all that information, so I'm always going to look for an opportunity to slot it in just as my personal play style and what I enjoy. One of my personal favorite scenes was this hello and welcome back flash mob. I think it does a fantastic job of really hinting at what's about to occur, as with the agents being called back into like part one, like poetry, it rhymes.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme, every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
And this was such a fun little scene that I was thinking of the entire time. I had show tune music ready to go for when this occurred, and it gives your agent that great insight into Bast if their character hasn't embraced that yet, or if they're a new character and don't realize the scope of what's occurring. But this was one of my favorites. I did use every single scene that's listed inside these interludes, and they're pretty straightforward. It's just important to let your agents know that this is more of like a choose your own adventure interlude versus any extended roleplay segment. It was mostly me reading off, giving them a few options, and then picking and then moving on, which is kind of how it plays out in the interlude of the long years, which you're kind of looking to rehash in a way. But very, very enjoyable, very, very creepy scenes. I encourage you to use all of them because they all reveal good information and really set your agents up for this finale. So part 4 fully kicks off when the keylogger Tony left picks up someone talking about Conradin and the children in the cornucopia house, which is going to be this scribe for life, the plagiarist we heard about back in part 3. And this was such a good facepalm from agents, as they kind of figured they'd hear from him again, and it was wrapping back around, especially with the mention that Conradin knew the scribe for life 420, and he's going to give this large dump of what happened with Conradin and what's going on. And I converted most of this into handouts. There's a lot of information you're going to be reading off in this section, so it was a little tough for me to act this out in character, but I did, and then later I converted that all to handouts, as most of the information is kind of read in third person anyway, so it was very easy just to give my agents all of that stuff, along with, I believe you should be using the information found inside the evidence kit for this campaign. It contains extended information about every single book that this guy mentions, and basically just leads to this massive lore dump handout. So your agents can receive this huge lore dump handouts, and they're going to basically sort it and read it on their own, which I sent it all digitally. My agents did a decent job of reading that, coming together. They should have all the information they need about Conradin at this point, which was a good revelation as they sat and sifted through. After this, and I gave them this big handout to read inside their downtime, we met and we had a whole session of just recapping the campaign. My agents actually had some incorrect assumptions about what Conradin was attempting to do. They kind of assumed that Conradin was trying to end the world or end Bast and against Bast, until we sat down and went through the entire campaign A to Z, which I'll show a screenshot of what my whiteboard looked like for my agents as we went through it. And for this kind of middle teaching session, you're going to want to focus on playing it like a teacher. You know, if you're a long-time handler or GM or DM or whatever, you kind of have that teaching bone in your body, that way of presenting things, presenting information, and you're just going to lean into that. You need to view yourself as a teacher or a guide, because there is a lot of information in this campaign, and my agents had all of it correct, just in different orders or not potentially understanding what was going on. But once we sat down and went through it and went through every single bullet point, they understood. And I'll go into more detail about that right now. So this is a very simplified whiteboard of what we did. We actually had one whiteboard previous of this, which unfortunately I didn't take a photo of before we erased and moved on. But we had one that went into even more detail before we went into the big picture here. Now, the book is going to give you two options for running this, and I kind of mixed both of them. One is just going to be the quick conclusions. That's like, boom, boom, boom. Here's what your agents need to understand, and that's that Conradin is just repeating this cycle that summoned your players in part 1, similarly in part 4, but now he has the full government approval and set up companies within companies to have a secret shell inside of a legal ICE black site. So we went through this, and the book also has that long way of doing it. We're going to give up some ideas, and I had all my agents kind of go around the table about, where they're located, what went wrong, but it's going to be a little incongruent, because while I wanted to play up like the book recommends, of where they're located and this kind of in-person research. In actuality, this section is going to be sort of meta, especially if you don't have any agents that are left over from part 1. You're going to have to hand wave a little bit and tell them, hey, you guys just kind of magically know everything that has occurred up to this point, even if most of you guys are completely new and only one of you guys was even with the previous team in any capacity. So it gets a little weird here, and we kind of just went above the table with it and just have this big discussion. Like I said, my players thought initially that Conran was actually trying to summon Ragnarok, much like is mentioned by the kids or the priest in part 3, kind of about how the kids are operating, but eventually went around to the final of making more teeth, and that's his goal, and that they weren't marked as teeth yet, and I don't think they knew that they were going to become teeth, other than they just had to stop it before teeth came. So it was this growing horror of like, oh, we can beat the whatever teeth are out there to this assault, and then realize no, that they are actually the teeth, and that this is all going like this. I turned a lot of it into handouts too, especially the sections that mention, what your agent might think, or if they think they made it in time or not, and I just kind of turned that all into handouts to improve the section. But like I said, this wasn't the most in-character play I've ever done in this game, and it did just kind of become this above-the-table, big picture, referencing everything, letting players do roles, everyone looking on where they can find information. Overall, very cool and a very fun session to sit down and go through the campaign A to Z as almost a victory lap in a weird way of everything that's happened, and my players certainly did a lot of home scene research into Bast, so it was good just to fit all these puzzle pieces together. And it might be more unclear than you think, but your agents legitimately do have everything they need to stick this together. And sometimes they just need a little push or a little guidance in the right direction, which I'm more than happy to say my agents did come to the correct conclusion. But they had the idea that he was summoning Ragnarok as something they could feed to Tony to lie to the program, to get a program approval for this assault, for this stopping of this world-ending ritual, as my agents know the kind of details that are going to get it moving. So you're going to cut to in media res of Tony showing up, post-explanation of everything that's going on. Like I said, my agents lied and said they had Ragnarok occurring, and Tony gets one human roll of his 60%, and he failed. He rolled a 71. So Tony actually gave them program resources with the promise that this was going to be stealthy and going to be undercover, and they're not going to free any of the legal detainees. They're just going in to stop the assault. It was very cool. I was excited to see them ice Tony if it went wrong, but if that didn't happen, the dice said Tony was going to believe them, so Tony did, and they had some time that they wouldn't have had otherwise to work out this assault. Once your agents put everything together and take care or figure out how to placate Tony in this final assault, that's when this game really opens up. Now, I also gave them some information about the surplus and the Frank Harvey water reclamation plant prior to their conversation with Tony, as they just want to do a simple drive-by and scope out some stuff, which I let them have. So it's just important to know all the information about this place. There are several angles for your players to go down this rabbit hole of this assault on a federal building, and I think it's really, really well written. There's tons and tons of ways of your agents to infiltrate this place and assault it or sneak in or however they want, and that's the sign of a good chapter, is that this is very much similar to part 1, and it should kind of echo that as your players going at that growing worry in their head that is this just going to happen again? I mean, at a certain point, they're going to learn that they're just going to be represented with the choice from part 1 to when they get the call from Clove, whether they should kill the kids or not. And it's just that same idea, but recontextualized now. And it's very bleak because for the most of the campaign, my agents kind of joked at certain points. Oh man, we should just kill all the kids. They're getting punished for their one good deed they did in the beginning of the game. And that was kind of the joke of, oh yeah, we should have killed the kids. Well, now it's time to shut up and put your money where your mouth is. You have the opportunity to do this again, and you can decide whether you want to kill their kids or not. Can you bring yourself to do it? And that's really the question you should be trying to burn in the back of their minds as they do this part, because that really is what this is showing, is that if you have the decision from part 1, this horrible decision, this capstone decision that gripped them and got my agents into the campaign in the first place, represented with more context, you understand what's at stake on both sides. Can you bring yourself to do this horrific final act? And again, that's just something you should just be brewing or perhaps dropping in their minds. I even gave that to my agent with the highest unnatural and let them know that if they wanted to break the cycle, killing the kids is an option. So to kind of increase that internal tension and to drive more of those character wedges between players to really increase the dramatic finale that this can be. Another quick note on this assault and the prep work. There are several instances where it asks your agents to roll for things. Sometimes, if they roll and they fail, they still get the information, but something is alerted. Other times, nothing happens. Now, I want you to keep in mind that I feel like, from my perspective of running Delta Green, is if an agent has a certain percentage and there's no super pressure on them in the moment to do things, they should just get it if they have the proper percentage, or if another agent is assisting them and they both have that good percentage. Otherwise, what you could always do is have it just take more time, because your agents are going to be under the gun every single second of this one. Every single day that passes is another day that Conrad is torturing these children, and the program might catch wind of what they're doing. So that would be a good thing to do if you don't feel like just completely gutting off information because they failed to roll, but have them get it, but it just takes them more time. This is also a good time to talk about the fantastic additions Erwin the German has posted on the God's Teeth Discord. I used their 3 write-ups, one of which is the Outlaw Green Box, which is offered if your players go to the Outlaws, which my agents did, given that 2 of them were Outlaws. And this is a fantastic green box full of local kind of cryptozoology stuff, some really nice weapons and assistance for the assault, and there's nothing in here that's going to instantly kill your players like I see a lot of green boxes have, so there's no gotchas that are going to derail your campaign at the last minute. Very well written green box here. I also really liked their expanding the pack. They add 2 new members to the facility. Both are really bleak and messed up characters that my players really enjoyed murdering in the end, as well as a program hit squad and how the program hit squad would assault the working group Masticate if needed. I'll post, like I said, the links to these Google Docs inside my description, but you can find them originally on the God's Teeth Discord. Fantastic stuff here. I used all of it and I really enjoyed it. It will expand your campaign a little bit, but I think this is some great stuff for your finale. Now, my agents knew that time was ticking for these kids versus any outside thing like the program coming down within a week. They knew they had several weeks to prepare with the program resources, but every day that passes is a day that these kids are still being tortured on this side. So they wanted to go as soon as possible, so they split their duties. Some of them watched out over the facility and gained all the knowledge that you can get from watching it out and staking it out, while also getting bitten in various circumstances by animals, while a few more of mine looked up the addresses and found all the addresses of the people on the side, including Conrad, following this address to his apartment and discovering his knowledge of the ritual and who the monsters he staffed this side with, which again feels very much like part 1, where there's these people who don't even realize their place in this cosmic cycle and what they're doing other than being allowed to hurt children, and that's the entire purpose of why they're there. So everyone in this facility, everyone with air quotes, there are some good people in this facility, but most people are being blackmailed or are pedophiles or something inside this facility. So definitely gave my agents more aggression, more anger towards these targets when they came down on them. But they also found that Conrad is aware of what's going on and actually wants them to come in and murder everyone and save these kids to continue the cycle. And this is a great moment of horror of, oh my goodness, are we soon enough? Are we too late? And we're all getting marked as teeth. And that's, again, that growing horror issue placing in where it's fatalistic. And no matter what they do, they will be marked as teeth and they will be part of this assault. And they're going to save these kids. And these kids are going to grow up and be connected to the unnatural and lead them down this rabbit hole, continuing the whole campaign over and over again. Which, again, Conrad's knowledge of this should be this extra horrific detail in there. But like I said, there's plenty of ways for agents to go about this assault. My agents also pretended to be police officers and got an interview through Tony to view the facility, and it's showing that the public side, the entirely legal side of this facility, is also horrific. And that should be another moral decision your players need to make, and that increases the impact of this finale versus part 1, where it was just the kids were in there that needed to be saved. This one has a lot of people that are legally being detained in these horrific conditions, and your players need to decide, is that something they want to do? Do they want to save all these people that are legally detained and help get them out? My players settled on yes, but it didn't work out in the end anyway because they all shot each other and died. But that should be another thing you're pushing with this finale, of that great decision point of, do we just ignore the people that are legally in the United States federal immigrant detention system being tortured every single day in these horrific conditions? And do we only worry about the ones that are basically summoning us for this teeth ritual? That's what they got to decide. And it really depends a lot on where their priorities lie and how strongly they feel about certain things. Sean on the God's Teeth Discord has also isolated this map of the facility and removed all the names from it, which was very helpful. I had this both laying on the ground in front of my players, and we used cubes to show who was where in the final assault, and just to have, I figured this would be on the wall posted somewhere like a fire map for my players when they toured the facility, so it was very easy for me to justify just giving this over, and I let them assault the facility more. I also made sure to include the fact that that garage door was right here, poking from the private side out into the desert. It doesn't really show it on this map, but it does talk about it. So that's where I assumed it was. And I think that worked out as giving my agents a secondary thing to assault when they had their RPG to blow it open and go in from that side. While another team snuck in with a fake prisoner, caught the guards, theoretically with their pants down, basically surprised, jumped them before assaulting the private side from this. So we had a dual assault going on where Conrad and his few holdouts in here were gunning down, shooting them as they came in on both sides. My players also lied to Tony going into this assault, and my players were actually concerned and believed that they could stop the ritual if they didn't kill everyone in the facility, which was kind of just a stretch in logic, but I understood how they could arrive at that conclusion. So they were very much initially about going in non-lethally to this place and making sure they didn't kill anyone like Teeth, show up and kill everyone as in the sacrifice. But Tony believed them, given that they showed up with tons of non-lethal tools, and they had him set up this stealth infiltration mission before to go and check out the facility. So Tony did believe them when it came to their goal, which was to infiltrate very stealthily, get in and get out and cover up any evidence of them being in here, stopping the ritual. So Tony gave them 2 program operatives to work with as well, which my players planned on using as dead bodies, as the outlaw group, Agent Alphonse, demanded that they leave some program bodies in the wreckage to help cover up for their own deaths, as I was going to give the outlaws a way to help the agents fake their death to escape the program hit squads that would be coming after them after this assault, which inevitably would blow up in the program's face and cause this whole issues. So Tony gave them those 2 operatives as well, who did serve as very good bait for this assault, and they chose to do it in off hours after hunting down one of the security guards on the private side and killing her in a drive-by shooting outside of her apartment, so that they could have one less and one tired guard on the assault when they did it, which they did end up coming down like the hammer of God on these people inside the facility, which is very much a callback to part 1 and kind of how it's presented. They only had minimal resistance, but that meant that they were all fully kitted up and ready to go when they started gunning each other down. I'll just have to throw out there, the description of Conrad's private side is horrific. I legitimately got teared up and choked at the table when describing the conditions that these kids are in. And it's just something you should be aware that no matter how hardened your agents might be, it's always a good time to make sure you're still using your X cards and something like that, because legitimately horrific stuff going on inside here that you should be aware of, even if you're watching this prior to running a campaign. Making sure that, I know part 1 is bad, part 4 is possibly worse, given that it's housed inside a legal entity that is occurring, that there is a level of depravity it presents as being normal, and then really makes you wonder and follows up with the horrific things that are happening in the private side. So this will test your stomach when it comes to your description and what's occurring in the campaign. Just something to keep in mind. So the assault, like I said, went as thus. My agents snuck in with the 2 program operatives from the front, pretending to do a late night prisoner transfer after taking out the security guard at home. When they went in here, they jumped the guards here in the communication, destroyed the computers, and they went into the floor. They also started freeing prisoners on this side, and eventually went on to go through the airlock and the crisis room to breach this door. One of my agents had background in breaching doors and some breaching tools, so he was able to pop these doors and get through, while my 2 outlaws and one of my agents on this side shot an RPG at this wall to breach this metal door that was there, this sheet door that was sealed and not really opened, and then assaulted from this side. I had Conrad know about their assault because they failed a roll, which alerted the ICE special agent added in Erwin the German's thing to their assault and it's coming, and the fact that they're looking up addresses. So they were equipped with their machine guns, and Conrad and I gave him a machine gun with lethality percent because it was automatic because he was really ripped and ready for this assault with armor. Now my agents were very well armed, so this was a little bit of a slaughter, but they got some good kills off on the other agents. My Delta Green agents, everyone made it inside the chutes, saw what's horrific. My my program people they called in where we're talking what the hell is up with these outlaw people before my agents all jumped the 2 program agents to kill them and leave their bodies in the wreckage. After that happened, one of my agents with Conradin bleeding in the corner, smiling at everyone, and he gave them their speech, went to go kill Conradin with another agent went to stop them, and they're wrestling on the ground. While they were wrestling on the ground, these were my 2 program agents wrestling on the ground, my 2 program players. The 2 outlaws, not the players but the NPCs, walked up and attempted to shoot my program agents on the ground, as they would leave even more program bodies in the mess, kind of leading to this big confrontation of my 2 outlaw NPCs and one of my 2 outlaw agents siding, while the other 3, that's going to be my 2 program agents and my 1 outlaw agent, siding against them, leading to this 3v3 confrontation in the end, which actually triggered most of their hunt powers, in which, they actually let it happen when they hit 0 HP as well, to kind of pop up like a zombie and fight. And everyone actually did their sand rolls, failed all their sand rolls, so they got to use this power. So it was a lot of people popping up, dying, and kind of going through this whole violent cycle. I also gave them plus 20% to any action that equals committing violence towards this, and they all rolled a d6 to see who they would attack. So it was this kind of mash melee of attacking and attacking of each other until eventually it was my 1 outlaw NPC and my 1 outlaw agent standing. Conradin had been stabbed by one of my program agents, which kind of confirmed to my outlaw player that the cycle has been complete and that they are teeth and that these kids will grow up to get involved in the unnatural and continue the cycle. So he gunned down the last outlaw standing, leaving just my player, the outlaw. He was very injured. His hunt power was activated, so he was actually at 0 HP. His stomach was hanging out. He had taken lots of shotgun rounds to the chest, so he knew he was dead. So what he did is he then had an explosive on him that he rigged up to the cages to kill the children and to stop the cycle, a horrific act. He then turned, walked out into the desert several feet, stumbled over, and died on the spot, leaving no survivors for this assault. The bomb went off, killing the kids, so stopping this ritual. Really horrific, bleak ending. I mean, total TPK. Everyone died here, but it was for the greater good and of the drama in this scenario, and no one walked away from this feeling salty. The Delta Green rules actually really do PvP quite well, as all of the enemies and NPCs run the same way that agents are going to run, so it felt very fair and natural to them descend into this shootout between the outlaws and the program, and then leading from there to just being the 1 remaining member who was doomed and knew what he had to do with his life. A lot of this drama in the ending was brought up by me. The book doesn't have anything to have your players be outlaws as they're brought in, but given that the mole angle didn't really play out in my campaign. Yes, one of my agents was a mole, but it never actually extended to anything actionable or any PvP. I again decided to have some of my players be outlaws and increase that tension to just give more and more wedges on my players. I didn't quite expect it to go to PvP and be the murder fest that it was in the end, but my god, was it entertaining, and everyone agreed that it was a great, literally explosive finale for this campaign that kind of peaks in God's light if you're running that. So it's something I was worried about the campaign being too normal, which is both a good and a bad thing, as the return to normalcy shows that some of the worst stuff happening is just human cruelty against other humans. No supernatural element needed at all. But from a mechanical standpoint, I was worried about it being just a little dull, which I'm happy to say it was not, and felt like a fantastic ending. But I do have some criticisms to the way this campaign is laid out. You're going to want to study this appendix of the book, as a lot of the important stuff about the ending and how they're going to navigate this situation is contained inside like a page here. I think is some really nice information that could have been extended more. I also think the epilogue that it gives is a little weak and something that I had to write up myself. Again, Erwin the German has another fantastic write-up of an epilogue inside their actual play report that is worth reading to show how you want to do an epilogue. And I did something similar. I also included Tony getting weeping and crying and begging for his life next to an open grave as the program director shot him for losing control of Group Masticate and blowing this big cover that the program had. But I really wish we would have had more information here to build off of, or some more stuff in the finale. I understand being left open-ended is quite cool and definitely let my players wondering whether they made the right decision or not, if the children could have been saved or not. But I would have liked to see some actual examples of the fallout, or perhaps this extensive war that happens if the outlaws are brought in, and how this kind of kicks off some big conflict between the outlaws and the program, as this very much feels like an opening shot to a war that is about to occur. And to expand a little bit on Conrad's fate, who is here mogging the camera, they really picked the Gen Z stare and the broccoli haircut for him, so I respect that decision, Dennis. I really do. But you could have picked maybe a little bit more menacing photo of him. Regardless, he sat there in the corner during this final assault, watching all this violence go down with a smile on his face. One of my agents even ran up with her dying breath, also injured and activated from the hunt, and stabbed him in the throat, and he smiled, and he actually helped guide the knife in as he died. I don't know how he would have reacted to the knowledge that they were going to kill the kids, but regardless, he was enthralled that his guardian angels have shown up, and his ritual was a success. I mean, all my players were new teeth. He has made new teeth from scratch, and that's exactly what his intention is. He was a great villain, and he was prepped and ready to shoot my agents as they walked in, as he knew the assault was coming, but he also kind of was okay with them murdering everyone as is part of the plan. He just does things sometimes. He just fills a role that he feels he needs to do. And for a enemy that's A, is like the only kid you meet in part 1, and B, actually isn't present very much through the campaign, I still thought his appearance at the end was impactful. And again, for a campaign that he's the closest thing we have to a central villain besides entropy and a god itself, I thought he was a great final villain, and he really worked his way inside the American justice system to find his perfect niche and do exactly what he wanted legally, which is extra horrific. Also, for this finale of God's Teeth, I was under a real-life timing constraint of we had to be done by this date, so I didn't feel like I got the chance to play out the outlaw characters or some other conflicts as much as I would have, but I really think if you're committed to this final part, it can actually be a quite chunky ending and take quite a bit of time as you work and massage all these competing plot lines, and Tony and the outlaws and program agents and hit squads and all the horrific people on Conrad's side. So there really is a lot of content here you can expand on. Again, I won't say I felt rushed, but there were certainly things I wish I could have done or expanded on more if I wasn't constrained by a real life timing point, but that's life. We all have jobs, we all have things going on, so sometimes something's gonna happen that means you have to wrap it up, and I'm pretty satisfied with what I walked away from here. So I ended on a big epilogue about how the program scrambles to cover up this large explosion that happened and this huge lapse in security, and how it leads to this opening war between the outlaws and the program that it feeds into, along with all of my dead agents being labeled Antifa terrorists, and the program doing its best to cover it up, but ultimately failing as the scale of the cover is so large, and them having to brief President Trump on all this unnatural, everything the program didn't want to happen has come to pass, which is really great for a campaign that kind of sets up the program as bad guys. This is a campaign that actively paints the program in its rightfully bad light, and I think that's such a great element in this campaign that really, really shines, that I don't think is present in that many other Delta Green scenarios, and I really, really respect Caleb Stokes, the author, for pushing that angle. It was so much fun, along with showing that the Outlaws, too, might not be the correct decision. I mean, they're here just to make violence and blow stuff up and kill people just to fuck over this other group. So there's some just fantastic plot lines happening here. My agents also, when blowing up and killing everyone and everyone dying means that they didn't get to save all of the countless public side people. Most of them wandered out from their free cages just to be rearrested by the US government later, meaning that their goal of saving these people has also failed and they got fed back into the machine. A rightfully bleak ending for what my agents did, and that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. If they all died, there was no one there to rescue anyone else. And that's going to wrap up God's Teeth. This took us about 9 months to play through with pretty consistently scheduled games every single week. We only play for about 3 hours at most, so we're definitely on the shorter side of sessions, but again, that's 9 hours with the only thing we left out being God's Law. I will have a video out about the entirety of the God's Teeth campaign and my general review of it, as I think there's some really things you should judge going into whether you want to commit months of your life to running this. I think this was a fantastic experience as a Delta Green handler. This was a fantastic experience for my players, and I really can't recommend this campaign enough if you have the stomach to deal with it. Like, yes, it's bleak. Yes, it's boots on ground. Yes, it's True Detective, but it's just so good. It's so many great plot lines, so much juicy information, so many great above the book meta criticisms of the United States government and the way the United States government almost acts like a deity in itself, recycling people over and over again, the internal cycles of violence, these just great critiques and criticisms that we all just loved as a table to sit down and discuss before and after our games and during it above. Fantastic stuff. But that's going to wrap it up. Hope everyone's really enjoyed my parts 1 through 4 and all the additional God's Hunt information. I've liked making these videos. I really hope it helps you out. And thanks, everybody. I really appreciate you watching.